Hello there again. This is Carol King, the developer of Custom Home Builders Solutions, also known as CHS. This video is a continuation of videos about vendors, setting up vendors, and controlling vendors and maintaining vendors. In this case, we are going to talk about what happens if you accidentally set up a vendor twice. Maybe you had it set up once a while back and then somebody else comes along and they set it up. Maybe perhaps you hadn't used the vendor for a while and you did have it set up back when you used it, and then somebody comes along and they do a PO and they decide, oh, I need to set up a vendor for this PO, we haven't used them, etc., and sets up the same exact vendor but uses a little bit of a different vendor code, etc. So let's go demonstrate what to do about that and how you can move records from one vendor to another if you accidentally set up duplicate vendors. So I'm going to go to Vendors Setup and Info, and I'll go to Vendors List and Setup. And I happen to know, because I set it up to know about this, that under W's, we actually have duplicate vendor. Notice here there's Wilson Roof, and then there's Wilson John. This one says John Wilson Roofing Company. This one says Roofing Company. And I think, oh no, I have those set up twice, and I know I want to have it as Wilson Roofing Company. So let's see if I can delete John Wilson Roofing Company. And it tells me there are accounting records attached to John Wilson, so you can't delete it once to know if I want to look at those. And I can see that I've made one entry in and out to accounts payable for roofing turnkey for this job, Kennedy. And that was done actually today while I was setting everything up, and I made that new vendor called John Wilson, and I made a PO. And what could happen, because CHS is so great, that you can create an accounts payable entry from purchase orders, from a purchase orders costs and management window, where you can just create an accounts payable bill from a PO, so it would automatically have this vendor attached to the PO, and you would have made your accounting record for that. If we look at the used for John Wilson Roofing Company and look at purchase orders, we do have a change order purchase order for their cabana roof for that change order, and we do see that. So we had one of those. In vendor payables bills, again, we had one of those. Let's take a quick look at, well, let's say, maybe we never use these people, so the Wilson Roofing Company. So let's see if we can delete that. And we have accounting records. Do we want to look at them? And look how these accounting records are back in 2013 when we were using Wilson Roofing and then didn't use them for a while until just now. So you can see that there was just one actually accounts payable record for Wilson Roofing. So what we want to do, because we do want it under Wilson Roofing, is we'd like to move all the records for John Wilson Roofing to Wilson Roofing and then delete John Wilson. If you take a look at the setup for Wilson Roofing Company, you can see that the contact name is the same, John Wilson DBA, etc. So it's the same person, and if you look at the addresses for both of them, if I close this, you see this address here, and then you click on this one, you see this address here. You know that those are the same people. So there's a button up here about move records from one vendor to another, ? And it says if you accidentally set up two vendor codes for the same vendor, you can move database records from one vendor code to another vendor code by using the Move Records button under Utilities on the Home tab. So let's go see what happens if we try to do that. So under Miscellaneous Utilities, we will go to Move/Update Records. And we see one here that says Move Records from one vendor code to another vendor code. So we want to move from that John Wilson one, so let's just start typing Wilson, from John Wilson Roofing to Wilson Roofing. I want you to notice that those two names are not the same, so I'm going to click Move the Vendor Records. And I'm getting a message that this utility is meant to be used for moving records from one vendor code to another vendor code where both have the same vendor name. Please go to the vendors list under payables and edit the vendor with the least amount of POs or checks so that the vendor name is the same for both the vendor codes. This is to make sure that the name printed on checks and purchase orders that have already been issued will match. So let's go and take care of that. I did want to show you how that happens. Back to vendors list and setup, vendors list, go to the W's, and Let's change John Wilson Roofing Company to Wilson Roofing Company by clicking the pencil edit icon there. So I can just get rid of the John. CHS is very diligent about making sure that you don't just sort of accidentally move records from one vendor to another that you shouldn't have. So let's go back to the home main menu, collapse this. Back down here, let's go to move update records again. Click the vendor code to vendor code 1. Before I do this, I'd like you to know that what happens is that when you click to move the vendor records, CHS will simply go through and change all records that have the first from vendor code to the vendor code that we select to move them to. So what it's doing in the background is just going to all of these tables that you can see in the list here and finding where the first vendor code is and updating it to the second vendor code. So I'm going to do that again. We want Wilson John. Move from Wilson John to Wilson Roofing. We should be fine now because the vendor names for both of those are the same. So I'll click Move the Vendor Records. It says it will update all records in the tables from the first vendor to the second. Is it okay to update? And I'll click OK Update. It tells me that they have been successfully moved. So let's close this expansion. Go back to the vendors list, which is already open in the tab up here, actually. And I'm just going to refresh it just because, and I go back to the W's, and of course I still have Wilson John here, but let's see if it just lets me delete it. CHS has checked to see if this vendor has been used in CHS, and it has not. Note that if you delete this vendor, a record will be put into the audit table. Is it okay to delete it? What this means is that CHS looked throughout all the tables to see if it found that Wilson John, and it did not find it. So it is going to let us delete it. So let's do OK Delete. So let's go back to our W's again. It had to refresh because we deleted. And now we only have Wilson Roofing Company. And if we look at the used for Wilson Roofing Company, and we look at the vendor payables bills, now you will see that the one we did a long time ago and the one I did this morning for $3,000 are both in the vendor ledger for just Wilson Roofing. So basically, quote, it moved that record for Wilson John into Wilson Roofing. If we look at the purchase orders real quick, you can see that there are two purchase orders, one for this job, Kennedy, and for DeGroot. And you can see the 3,001 and you can see the 25,000 one that was an old one. So now everything is under Wilson Roofing and they won't be in two separate places. One of the main reasons for doing that is, say somebody told you, well, I paid Wilson Roofing because they're saying they didn't get paid, who knows what. And you go look at Wilson Roofing and you say, well, this is before I made the change, you say, well, no, I don't see that you did get paid. But actually, there's another lurking vendor there where they did get paid. So you can see how important it is to try to keep everything in the same vendor so you don't get mixed up by having duplicate ones and you click on one of them and you think, oh no, something's missing from this one. You click on the other one, oh no, something's missing, or you get bad information because you have these duplicate vendors. What I'd like to show you real quick is that CHS has tracked what you just did in the vendors audit table, so I'm going to click that. The last thing that I did, the latest thing I did, was I confirmed deletion of Wilson John. And here's where user used utility to move database records from vendor Wilson John to Wilson Roofing. And it does that twice so that you have the audit about both these vendor codes here. And it shows where I was making edits to Wilson John, where I was changing names and setting up for this video, but it was tracking all these things I did to the vendor. Now if you go to search your audit records, if you open the great big database and you look for Wilson John down here, you won't see this because this lookup place is just looking for vendors that set up. So if you want to say, I have these reports and this purchase order that was issued and it says Wilson John, what's the deal? I can't find Wilson John anymore. On this audit table, you could put down here, it says type something in. If it's missing, type in Wilson John like that, submit a search of the audit table, and you see that the contact, which is vendors, and all vendors will be here too, which is the contact column, which will have payers, employees, and vendors in it. You'll see what's happened is that user used the utility, again, to move all records from Wilson John to Wilson Roof, and then the user deleted Wilson John. So that will give you a clue as to what happened if you have some various reports or other things that had the Wilson John vendor code on it, and now you can't find stuff for Wilson John. So you can do things like that if you get familiar with the audit table. The audit table is available under miscellaneous utilities, not just here, and you can get the full audit table, and then you could do a search for anything about Wilson John, not just the stuff that had to do with vendor changes. So I hope that helps when that happens to you, when you do a duplicate vendor, and have a great day, and thank you for watching.